Housing First has 5 key principles. If you're not following the 5 principles, it's not Housing First. Principle number 1, immediate access to housing with no housing readiness conditions. Participants meet with a support team once per week, but housing is not dependent on psychiatric treatment, abstinence, or other readiness conditions. And when we say no housing readiness conditions, we mean none. Now, many participants stay housed in their first rental, but evictions happen. With the support team's help, it's an opportunity for learning, adjusting, and the immediate chance to try again. Research shows Housing First reduces emergency room visits, hospitalization, shelter use, detox services, and incarceration. There are no common indicators that predict who Housing First will and won't work for. So given its effectiveness, let's focus on Housing First, then let participants tell us the next step.
All of us deserve housing. Everybody on the planet deserves a decent place to live. So it's not about, are you ready? Everyone is ready. And what we find is when people move into their own place, readiness comes.
It made sense to me that really the only readiness for housing was, were we able to sign the paperwork and get the damage deposit, and could they find their way back home? Did they have the capacity to do that? That was housing readiness. And really outside of that, I struggle to understand what it is that you need in order to be housed. Other than that place, that the door handle to turn and to be able to walk through that threshold.
We've been somehow doing things backwards for a long time, telling people they should work on their addiction and their mental health and do all this paperwork stuff, and then after that they'll be worthy of having somewhere to sleep.
But you can't not house people for the very reasons they need housing. That's why we say housing first, right? You have to be housed first, and from there, other things can happen.
My perception was that it was outside the realm of possibility. We can't do that. You have to go through these steps that have been laid out for all of us. So it really just reverses the whole system in this radical way. But the thing is that it works, and it works particularly well for people who are experiencing chronic homelessness.
You can't tell from the get-go who's going to succeed or who's going to fail. What you do know from the beginning is if you do it well, you will have a great success with 80% of the people.
For those of us that have ever worked in housing for a while, it's a never-never list of waiting. So this was amazing to me. It was absolutely amazing. You just sit down and meet somebody and you say, "Hi, do you need somewhere to live?" And it's just like this magic door opens.
The quickness that we got to go past any kind of assessment and straight to getting people in housing was kind of amazing, and I don't think I really appreciated at the time how unique it was. Going out into coffee shops and meeting people for the first time, and the first conversation we were having with them before we were talking about kind of struggles they had or kind of housing history was, where do you want to live? What kind of place you want to go to, and what's the quickest we can get you there?
I think the biggest change I observed in myself in working with this model was how I needed to throw out some of my beliefs in my incredible ability to predict things, because it was incredible how difficult it was to know who was going to do okay with the project.
We have this piece of paper that says that this person can't live in their home or needs supported housing, yet this person doesn't want to live in that place. What do we do?
There's a whole bunch of people where the story that had been told about them, the mounds and folders of collateral that was coming in, and even their presentation would scream not housing ready. Or, yeah, we're going to be back, we're housing them this time, or, sort of be that inkling in the back of the mind that says, well, maybe we shouldn't put them in the nicest apartment building because that's not going to last. And a lot of those people being in a stable, safe environment, a place that they could actually care about and build something in, completely changed things.
We're just going to have to give these apartments away one person at a time. We're not going to screen. 50 books drop away. We're not going to do any assessments. 100 books drop away. All this knowledge of how do we figure it out is no longer being applied in that way.
after like 4 or 5 years of working on this model, that I think that everybody's beliefs about who can live in independent apartments and who can't needs to be revised. I don't think any of the occupational scales that we typically use to determine housing suitabilities, any of the models we have for who should live in what kind of housing, I think they're probably all wrong.
I mean, everyone's very focused on, let's predict who can't make it. But in fact, we can't predict who can make it. You know, we really don't know. So we have to give every single person a chance to demonstrate what they can do in that new environment.
I'd meet people and just think, oh, this guy's gonna get housed, within 2 months he's gonna have a job, he's gonna graduate from the team, and that would not be the way things would go at all. And then I'd meet somebody and think, this is really gonna be a challenge. 2 months later, I'd be sitting in their apartment, having a latte with them, with the espresso machine they just bought. I mean, there was no way of knowing at all.
As staff, we just need to let go of the idea that we know everything and you know, realize that we don't know anything, and you know, what we're there to do, if we're running Housing First programs, is to give people a chance, right? We don't know. So we gotta be there to support people no matter what, get them in there, and whatever happens, happens, and we deal with it. But, you know, we can't predict how people's lives go.
In housing in the past, if you blew it, you sort of blew it and you're out again, and you're back into that cycle. So I think that's what worked with Housing First, is that you don't blow it, you try again.
The model expects, I wouldn't say expect people to fail, but expects to have challenges along the way. And with the model, I mean, evictions are common, right? And that's part of the model, that people get evicted and then, you know, you put them in a new apartment and you look at ways to be successful. And that's what we found. We found a lot of people didn't make it in their first apartment. And I would say that, you know, we had a very, very challenging population.
We were very upfront with landlords. So it's not a housing only program, it's a Housing First program. And so we basically said, we're not going to promise problem-free tenancy, but what we are going to promise is responsiveness.
Continuing to have choice even in the face of failure. So, which is when it's most difficult to continue to give people choice. They just crashed out of their first apartment, and you have spent an enormous amount of time helping them set up in that first apartment, and there's an enormous disappointment on everybody's part. But let's not confuse what our job is to the experience of the person who actually lost the apartment. The disappointment is theirs. I mean, they have failed. We're there to support them through that failure, not to punish or judge. And how do you sustain that kind of belief that they can do better the next time?
And we found that most often people learned from their first experience, and if things didn't go well, they certainly went well in their second apartment. And the support teams are key. Once we sort of found the housing and someone chose where they wanted to live, that was the next phase where it was absolutely vital.
And so I think the difference is, by putting them into apartments, is you're really giving people something that they can work with and make changes with and go forward in their lives, which is different than, I think, just recurring shelter use.
At the end of the day, there's a need for shelters, emergencies, crises, unexpected stuff does happen, and you need a foot in the door, a way in where you can't, you know, give a month's notice, or sort of all of the parameters that come with renting places. But shelters are not where people need to be generally. People need to be in housing that makes sense to them.
Especially folks who have systemic barriers to why they're not housed, right, in terms of colonization, poverty, misogyny, you know, the murder of Aboriginal women in this country and Canada. Like, all of these things stacked up against folks. You don't fix that first. You house people first.